Today, we will delve into the world of unexplained military UFO encounters, from mysterious sightings of otherworldly craft to encounters with unknown and unexplained aerial phenomena. I'm on a journey of discovery. I am seeking answers to some of the most challenging mysteries that face mankind, and many nuggets of knowledge that could bring those answers are unsolved cases and tales of the strange and unexplained. This show focuses on recounting cases and stories of unknown phenomena, mysterious events, weird places, and the unexpected. So please make sure to like, subscribe, and comment your thoughts on the case we're about to cover today. I try my best to read all of the comments and all the DMs I receive across social media. And there's one question that I am constantly getting specifically from new viewers, and that is, what about military sightings with UFOs? And what about military sightings from other parts of the world? So this show will be a compilation of those cases. The not so famous ones, the ones that you may have never heard of. And by the way, I'm saving the best and the least known for last. Let me share my screen here and get straight into it. But first, I got to say hello to everyone catching this live. We got Sean, Tyler, Moon, Paul, Mr. Webb, John Aside, Brown Dwarf, Dama. that's how I call you now. Cadkins, Eric, welcome everyone. Let's get into this very first one. And so the first one we're going to cover took place November 4th, 1957 in Sao Paulo, Brazil. And this took place at 2 a.m. So not quite the witching hour, but pretty close at Fort Itaopu. So two guards stationed at the fort witnessed a dazzling light just plummeting from the sky at astonishing speeds. Initially, mistaking it for a star, they quickly realized that it was an object heading directly towards them. And as it approached, hovering about 1,000 feet away from the fort, it descended just dramatically. And in that moment, the details of the UFO became apparent to the guards. It was a circular object, roughly 100 feet in diameter, emitting an intense orange glow. Absolutely frozen with fear and armed with submachine guns, the guards didn't do anything. They were so petrified to engage the object or even sound the alarm, they just stood there like stones. And one of the most compelling eyewitness accounts came from Captain João de Silva, who reported that he saw the object up close and was able to make out its metallic surface and strange markings. And without warning, the UFO began to emit a loud humming noise, accompanied by a blast of heat so intense that it felt as though they were engulfed in flames. And despite no visible fire or light emitting from the object, they were so overcome by fear and the scorching heat. You won't believe this. Their uniforms ignited. They caught on fire. And while one guard collapsed on his knees, overwhelmed and losing consciousness, his companion sought refuge beneath a cannon. And their screams caught the attention of the nearby troops because, again, this took place at 2 a.m. But before any response could be mustered out, the lights from the UFO disappeared. They went away, leaving the scene of darkness and absolute confusion. And in the barricades where the other soldiers resided, chaos was all over the place. People were in a frenzy. The alarms were going off. People were screaming. Everyone was armed. And as described by investigator Dr. Olovo Fontes, he mentioned that amidst just this backdrop of confusion, the lights, their lights, the military lights, abruptly failed, including the main power supply and even the backup generators. Fontes depicted a scene of widespread panic with fear evident on every soldier's face, though he later admits to possible embellishment to intensify their reactions given the extraordinary circumstance. Because this investigator, well, that's all he was just that, Dr. Fuentes. But he recounted that the disturbance lasted about 3 minutes, after which the fort's commander forbade any discussion about the incident or the visions that accompanied it. So, soldiers affected by the incident, they received medical attention for their injuries, and the fort was swiftly placed under martial law. And measures that Fontes pointed out seemed redundant for a military installation, don't you think? But it gets a little bit weirder because the investigations into the event attracted attention from high ranking officials, including officials, guess it, take a guess, because they got to put their nose and their fingers in everything. And I'm talking about the US military. They got whiff of this and they said, oh, we got to figure out what's going on here. So, weeks after the event, Fontes was approached by an officer aware of his interest in UFOs. And despite the officer's concern over potential backlash for providing classified information, Fontes initially kept silent about the conversation, but it wasn't until 2 months later, after speaking with three other Brazilian army officials present during the incident, that Fontes decided to share their account again 2 months after. And while his initial report didn't specify how these contacts were made, these officers corroborated the events as Fontes had described them. But you know what's even crazier about this is that just the day before, there was a UFO sighting in that area that civilians saw. And so many of these witnesses reported seeing a very strange cigar shaped object hovering in the sky just above the military installation on the day before and the day of the incident during the daytime, not at 2 a.m. like this particular sighting. And it's something that we hear from time to time, but not as frequently, where we come across a UFO flap, very specifically when it comes to military sightings. Yes, we have the Rendlesham Forest incident that we will not be covering today because I'm very aware that you know that case, but we can bring it in as an example of a UFO flap over a military installation. And I'm really glad that we're starting off with Brazil because Brazil has a fair share of UFO sightings. And if you are from Brazil, hit that like button right down below. Or if you have an interest in Brazilian culture or Brazilian history, but very specifically when it comes to UFOs, I've done an entire show on the mysteries of Brazil covering the best case of all time being the Colares Brazil incident. If you haven't heard of that case, the Mysteries of Brazil will be the show to watch. But let's move on over to the Korean War. In May of 1951, 1 year into the Korean War, Private First Class I want to say Francisco, but we're not covering Brazil anymore. It's Francis P. Wall and his regiment found themselves stationed near Chawan, about 60 miles north of Seoul. And as they prepared to bombard a nearby village with artillery, all of a sudden, the soldiers saw a strange sight up in the hills, like a jack o' lantern came floating down across the mountain. Now, this didn't take place in October, Halloween month, spooky month. It took place in May. And yet they were also describing it as a jack o' lantern shaped object. So, as the general infantry watched, the craft made its way down into the village where the artillery airbursts were starting to explode. So, Wall later told John P. Timmerman of the Center of the UFO Studies in a 1987 interview that, quote, we further noticed that this object would get right into the center of the airburst of artillery and yet remain unharmed. This took place in 1951. He gave that interview in 1987. So we're looking at a few decades after. But can we hover on this for a moment like a UFO in the middle of the sky? In the middle of war, artillery is going all over the place. The craft decides, you know what, I'm going to station myself right here. And when everything is blowing up in front of it, it remained untouched, undamaged, unharmed. Can we think of some possible ideas of why that might be the case? Could it have had a force field around it? Could people just have really bad aim and miss? Was it a hologram, maybe? Just a projection? What do you think? Serious question. Let me know in the comments. Let me know in the live chat. I will read them out loud because I would like to hear what you have to say about that as a possibility. Or do you think Mr. Timmerman is telling a fib, a lie, or maybe embellishing the event that took place in May of 1951, a year into the Korean War? Okay, serious question. Dema says it could have been transdimensional. Ooh, maybe. LZ says force field. Okay. Jessica says invisible field, like a shield. Could be. The sky's the limit here. Margaret says sounds some kind of energy bubble? Question mark, question mark. Maybe. Dinner Bell says ETs can fiddle around with time, matter, etc. We're going to leave that one there. That one's a pretty interesting one. Then we got to ask ourselves a follow-up question to that one. How? How are they able to do that? Is it based off of a technology? Is it based off of just mere understanding of quantum physics, quantum entanglement? Or is it something more that we have yet to understand? That one you can answer on your own time. So suddenly, the object turned, and whereas at first it had glowed orange, very much like the previous case, now it was a pulsating blue, green, brilliant light. And so he asked his company commander for permission to fire at the object with armor piercing bullets. And as the bullets hit the body of the craft, he recalled they made a metallic ding. The object started behaving still more erratically, moving from side to side as its lights flashed on and off. Wall's recollection of what happened next was stranger still. He says, quote, "We were attacked and swept by some form of ray that was emitted in pulses, in waves that could visually be seen only when it was aiming directly at you. That is to say, like a searchlight sweeps around and the segments of light, you would see it coming at you." And then he remembered a burning, tingling sensation sweeping over his body as if he were being penetrated by some kind of light or maybe even radiation. So the men rushed into underground bunkers and peeped through their windows, watching as the craft hovered above them and then shot off at a 45-degree angle. He says it was quick. It was there and then it was gone. 3 days after the incident, the entire company of men were evacuated by ambulance with special roads cut to haul out those too weak to walk. And when they finally received medical treatment, they had this extremely high white blood cell count. Okay, who are my medics here? Are you a medic? Answer me this. Why, after being shot by a beam of light, maybe even a laser, which is still light, right? Why would you have a higher white blood cell count? Then we have Richard F. Haynes, a UFO researcher and former NASA scientist, said they had symptoms that sounded like the effects of radiation. How many times? Someone, anyone, tell me. How many times have we heard that? Too many times to count. I'm going to need more than 10 fingers, maybe several sets of hands, not only to count the cases, but also to hold many bags of groceries and just make it a one trip, right? Now, in the wake of the Korean War, which ended in July of 1953, dozens of men have reported seeing similar UFOs over the course of the 37-month conflict. And the craft, often resembling flying saucers, there were some other shapes as well. But according to unofficial reports, as many as 42 were corroborated by additional witness reports, an average of more than one a month in just over 3 years. Why? Why? There are a lot of wars that have taken place on planet Earth, and there have been a lot of UFO sightings that are near the war zones. The biggest and best example to give are Foo Fighters during World War II. This is the one that most people can grasp but are familiar with. But we can add the Korean War to this one. We can add the war between North and South Korea at the demilitarized zone. Right there, right on that border between the two, there's been a handful of UFO sightings there. And the list goes on and on. Place one below. What war have you come across where there was a UFO sighting? Hmm? Paul says they were watching our military ability. Okay, let's get into that. For those catching this live, this is the great thing about catching a live show, that you're able to bring in your insights and your questions, and we're able to address it in this moment. So, if they are watching our military abilities, are they doing that because they are protectors, because they just want to understand the human mentality? If they've been here for 100 years, 1,000 years, we have not changed across history. Yes, we have better technology, but our mentality and our savageness is the same, just like our selfishness that hasn't changed over the decades, hundreds, thousands of years. If there was a civilization that wanted to study us, they could do it in 5, 10, 20 years, easy. But if they've been doing it, we can bring the Nuremberg incident into this. That took place in the 1500s. There was a whole UFO war happening in the sky. They Let's say they are extraterrestrial. Let's just say for a moment that they were. Why would they come back in the 1950s for the Korean War to see that or to be a part of that? Who knows, right? The sky's the limit here. Now, could it just be because they are assigned to watch over by another kind of entity? Are we a form of entertainment because we're full of drama and chaos and we're very irrational, maybe more so than other intelligent species that we could possibly define more as Spock in Star Trek, that are logical but that don't have emotions? Is that what is required to be able to explore space and investigate other sentient beings? Because it's hard. It's very hard to witness conflict, arguments, war, and to not attempt to fix it if you have the resources. It's Here's an example of that. You see two children fighting. Children, because they're smaller and you're more empowered compared to them, right? You're able to break them apart and say, "Hey buddy, we're not doing this right now." You can also do it between two dogs, two cats. You're able to break them apart for the most part. Sometimes it can be a little bit spooky, but you don't have the heart to see people suffer if you know you can fix it, because we have that sense of humanity in us. Can other beings do the same? And if they don't have emotions, are they able to really have a hands off approach and only observe but not interact? Tyler says maybe there's security to prevent interference from other aliens. That'd be an interesting one. That would be a turn for the books, as they say. It's become my new favorite thing. It's very funny to me. Scoop says it's like how we go fox hunting. Okay. S- We're going to leave that case there and move on to our next one as you are still digesting the possibilities, conjuring up questions on why you think there are a lot of UFO sightings that take place over war zones, military installations. It's a decently famous one, but we have to cover it. For my new people in the field, for those just getting into this topic, if you're not familiar with this one, it's important. And it is the battle over LA. You can tell from this picture, this is the actual image that was taken and posted across newspapers across the United States. So, on the night leading to the early hours of February 25th, 1942, Los Angeles found itself at the heart of a very perplexing and alarming event, later known as the Battle of Los Angeles or the Battle of LA. And just 2 months after the Pearl Harbor attack, the city was thrust into chaos, with 2 million residents awakened by the sound of air raid sirens, searchlights piercing the night sky, and the thunderous sound of artillery shells going through the sky. And this intense military response was sparked by the sighting of, guess it, of a UFO, which was observed by at least half of the city's population, igniting widespread panic, resulting in 6 deaths and causing millions of dollars in property damage. The tension had been building from the previous day, February 24th, when US naval intelligence issued warnings of a potential Japanese assault expected within 10 hours. Allegedly. So the city's nerves were further frayed that evening by sightings of flares and blinking lights near defense facilities. And despite the initial alert activated at around 7 p.m., it was later withdrawn, only for the situation to escalate dramatically in the early morning hours because radar picked up an unidentified target approximately 120 miles west of LA, heading towards the city. And by 2:15 a.m., anti-aircraft batteries were on full alert, and a widespread blackout was put into place at 2:21 a.m., and the air raid sirens blared shortly thereafter. So the apex of the incident was marked by the Los Angeles Times photograph capturing the object. And here we are seeing all the lights pointing at this object, which bore a distinct saucer like shape, compelling even skeptics to consider the mere possibility of a UFO. And the engagement, which concluded with a ceasefire order at 4:14 a.m., it plunged the city into a state of turmoil and left the nation grappling with questions about the night's event. Why were there shots being fired at 2 a.m. in one of the biggest cities in the United States? And better yet, no real answers were given because it was initially dismissed by military officials as a case of, quote, war nerves. And the incident's later analysis, including the photograph and witness accounts, has fueled ongoing speculation and debate of, oh, really? It's just war nerves and that's it? Can you really trust someone that has war nerves to be able to use pretty intense weapons? Hmm? That's dangerous. You can't do that. You got to trust the people that you're giving machine guns, submarine guns, submachine guns, caught myself there, cannons, so on and so forth. And if they have war nerves, we are in really big trouble. But despite the initial claims of false alarms attributed to jittery nerves in the wake of Pearl Harbor, this incident stands as one of the World War II's most enigmatic episodes, deeply entrenched in UFO lore and in mystery as well. But the confrontation, which dragged on for several hours, caused immense anxiety among the Southern California's residents. And yet, when the guns fell silent, there was none, nada, zilch, no evidence of any military attack, only the aftermath of over 1,400 rounds of anti aircraft ammunition fired into the sky. You, we, I wouldn't say we because many of us weren't here at the time, but those people, those residents paid for those bullets with their tax dollars. And to shoot out that many, to wake up 2 million people and to not give an answer, I smell some BS. I do. I really do. But it's what was mentioned by the Army's Western Defense Commander. He stated that it's clear that no bombs were dropped and no planes were shot down, highlighting the absence of an extreme attack. And ironically, the only damage incurred during the quote battle was some friendly fire with anti aircraft shrapnel causing a destruction throughout LA, shattering windows and damaging buildings, which further embedding the Battle of LA in the category of unexplained military history. I love this case. So this one's one of my favorites, and I'm really glad that we're able to cover it today for today's topic when we're looking at military officials encountering UFOs. We have to cover this one. Don't you agree? And if you don't agree, let me know why. Serious question. Let me know why you might not agree. Hmm. This next one I love. Why? Because we're talking about Uruguay. First of all, that word it just rolls off the tongue beautifully. But the second most amazing thing about Uruguay is that they formed the very first UFO office in all of South America back in 1979. They got it all started. They got the ball rolling for other countries such as Chile, Argentina, Ecuador, and Peru to follow up soon after. But the United States had their UFO office, at least their public one, by the year 2020, 2021. Uruguay had theirs in 1979, and yet no one talks about it. Why? That's why we're covering it here because no one else will. We'll do it together. But I have this case for you that took place back in 1972, specifically on October 28th, where a lighthouse on La Isla de Lobos, owned by Uruguay, is which is by the way has a navy headquarters at this lighthouse. During this time in 1972, it was manned by 5 Navy personnel. And the best part is we have their names. So we have Corporals Juan Fuentes, Jose Gomez, Hector Jimenez, Jose Lima, and Senior Officer Francisco Casudo. So after dinner, as the team settled in, Corporal Fuentes embarked on a route inspecting the lighthouse electric generators at around 10:10. That was basic protocol. And then he all of a sudden saw this array of lights on a terrace just 6 meters off the ground, and initially mistaking them for vehicle headlights, Fuentes, armed and without notifying his comrades, wow, that sounded real country there, he moved closer to investigate, and he encountered a multicolored craft adorned in white, yellow, and purple alongside humanoid figures. People are always saying, I'm not going to believe anything until a military official tells me so because they have the credentials, because they are putting everything on the line. South America has been playing at this for decades. They are a lot more open to these conversations than the United States, than Canada. South America has been doing this since 1979, at least publicly, but this case took place in 1972. So the entities, according to Fuentes, they were aboard their craft, these unknown entities, which ascended vertically with a humming noise, then swiftly accelerated southeast, leaving a fiery trail. Fuentes observed the craft's details. He noticed an inverted bowl shape with a dome and a door, supported by telescopic legs, and an instinctive corkscrew shaped, rotating antenna atop its metallic colored surface. And so when he's looking at this, he's like, what the heck is going on here? But he's petrified. And this is crazy. He attempts to grab his pistol and shoot at the craft, shoot at the entities, because the human mentality is to shoot first and ask questions later. But here's where it gets wild. The entities said, don't even bother. You're going to be doing it in vain. It's not going to work. And when those words were coming out of the extraterrestrials or these entities telepathically, by the way, he was frozen. He was petrified, not petrified with fear, but he was paralyzed. That's the better word to use. He could not move even if he wanted to. He attempts to tell his story to his men back at the lighthouse or close to the lighthouse after this whole incident happened, because the object, this UFO, shot up 15 seconds later. So he's in a daze and he's like, what is going on? I have to tell my men about this. So he walks on over, tells his men, and no one believes him. Could you imagine? Just put yourself in his shoes for a second. You are a military official with 4 other men. You walk off and you tell your story on your way back. Could you believe not trusting the words coming out of your comrade's mouth when in reality you have to trust them with your lives in any moment during any kind of fire taking place, any kind of war? Yes, there are jokesters. Yes, you hear crazy stories from time to time. Or am I taking this a little bit too out of context where you shouldn't believe someone that you would trust your life with? Hmm? Yes, you should be skeptical 100%. And yes, you should ask good questions when someone tells you their encounter. But does that mean that you shouldn't believe them at all? Either way, the captain didn't believe Fuentes' story, but it gets even stranger. It gets even more bizarre. Why? Because other military officials get involved in the case, but very specifically, those that cannot keep their nose to themselves, those that cannot keep their hands to themselves, at least allegedly. There were 2 American officials from the Spatial Investigation Service who were notably intrigued by his proximity to the craft during the event, which only lasted a few seconds, a minute tops, with Fuentes having a clear view for 15 seconds. And despite being the only witness, Fuentes' account is regarded as one of Uruguay's most credible UFO sightings, which is bolstered by Lieutenant Colonel Casudo's support, who vouched for Fuentes' simplicity and honesty. And this case has been deemed highly probable to be truthful and stands as one of the most compelling UFO sightings in South American history. Look, you can take it or leave it. I am not going to tell you that it is real or fake. That is not my place. That is for you to decide. But what we do here for every single topic, every single show that we cover, is I will provide you all the information that I come across, ask you questions, stimulate your curiosity, and then you make up your own mind on what you think is really going on here. But this is one that if it was coming from your average Joe, you might believe it a little bit less. But coming from a military official, it does add just a little bit more credibility. And yet we have to ask ourselves, could this be disinformation? Could it be misinformation? It's a yes. Yes, it can. And that's where you have to apply your own knowledge and decide on what you wish to believe and what not to. We don't have any data. All we have is a story. That's it. And that's where it gets kind of difficult. Have you heard of that case? I do want to know. But I have my best for last for you, the least known for last. Are you ready for this one? Because this one, here it is, took place in the Canary Islands back in 1976. I'm going to take a drink here. Yellow Banana says that they're ready. They're ready for this case. Heck yeah. Oh, Tyler says, do these wars predate nuclear technology? Could there be nuclear tech involved in secret that the craft are aware of? I like where you're going with this, Tyler. It's very interesting. And yes, there have been UFO sightings that predate nuclear technology and nuclear weapons as well. So let's add a little more to this. There have been, to my knowledge, recorded reports, and I'm putting recorded in all caps and in bold here, of a lot of UFO sightings that have taken place over military installations that have nuclear weapons and hovering over war zones that also have nuclear weapons. So that's a possibility. Why would they be monitoring it? Is it because they have, good real estate on planet Earth maybe and they want to protect that? Is it because they want to protect humanity? Is it because they want to protect their assets? We don't know. Because let's say that they are not from this planet. Let's say that they are extraterrestrial, maybe even interdimensional. We cannot place our human traits and thoughts and ideas on these entities that we don't fully understand. But it is interesting, and this is the question that a lot of people have been asking in this field of why do they have an interest in nuclear weapons? What's their intention? What's their agenda? Because everyone has an agenda, human or non-human. Everyone has one. The question is, what's theirs? Is it for our benefit? Or is it for theirs? Or is it a mutual benefit? Hmm? All right, let's talk about the Canary Island incident in 1976. So, in the early hours of November 12th, 1976, at the Talavera La Real Air Force in Badajoz, Spain, involving two soldiers, Jose Maria Trejo and Juan Carrizosa Lujan, encountered a UFO. And while on patrol at 1:45 a.m., have you noticed a pattern here? Before we even continue, have you noticed a pattern? There's a few, but I'm hinting at one specifically. If you're listening to this with big ears, maybe even headphones or speakers, put it down below on what you think that pattern might be. Because they encountered a series of unusual auditory phenomena or auditory, potato, starting with a noise reminiscent of radio interference that escalated into a very sharp whistle. And this auditory disturbance ceased after 5 minutes, giving away to the sudden appearance of a dazzling bright light in the sky, which persisted for about 15 seconds. So you have this sound that first sounded like radio interference, then a sharp whistle for about 5 minutes. And then all of a sudden, the sound stops. Pure silence. And then they saw a weird, strange light in the sky. What? For approximately 15 seconds. And the situation intensified when another guard, accompanied by a trained dog, joined Trejo and Lujan, and the trio, alerted by the sound of breaking eucalyptus twigs, launched a search of the vicinity. And the guard dog, upon being released, darted towards the source of the noise. But here's the crazy thing: upon returning, it exhibited signs of illness, a pattern that repeated several times with different dogs. And in an instinctive, protective manner, the dog began circling the soldiers, signaling a potential threat nearby. It was then that Trejo reported seeing a figure illuminated in green light, approximately 3 meters tall, with a human like shape, but composed entirely of small luminous objects, the intensity of which was stronger around its perimeter. The entity appeared to wear a helmet and had oddly long arms and lacked discernible hands or feet. And overwhelmed by the sight, Trejo all of a sudden lost consciousness. And in response, his colleagues discharged their firearm towards the figure, unleashing easily 40 to 50 bullets, yet that being vanished without a trace. And as Trejo received aid, the peculiar sound that had initiated the encounter was heard once again. And despite an extensive search by 50 men the following day, no evidence of bullet casings or impact marks were discovered. What? Leading to speculation and mystery, leaning for these men to not believe the trio of soldiers that previous night that had mentioned they easily shot 40 to 50 bullets. But there was no evidence of that. So the Air Force acknowledged that the soldiers had indeed used their weapons. And while we had Army veteran Vincent Juan, he posted that the experience was a hallucination amplified by fear and disorientation, despite the tangible actions taken by the soldiers during the encounter. So here we have a figure being seen and strange noises. Let's take this for face value just for a moment here as I scratch my eyelid. Could that have been military technology? People always ask this question. With all the UFO sightings that have taken place in modern times, I'm not going to bring back cases from the 15, 14, 1700s because that's almost not possible. But let's go to the year 1935 onward. Okay, and I'm just throwing a number there. People ask, could it be military technology? This is, I think, a decent example of that. Why? Because we are aware there have been scientific tests. There is technology out there that is public knowledge that noise and certain noise machines does affect your orientation, can create some pretty bizarre hallucinations, and can do other pretty menacing things to your mind. Could this have been a test on these military officials? Then we got to ask the detail about the dog, where it ran towards the noise. It came back and showed illness, and then it circled around the trio and saying, "Don't go there, it's dangerous." Could that also have been military technology? But here's why I want to bring this up. Here's why I'm bringing up this case to begin with, and why it is I'm emphasizing it for today's show being my favorite, or not my favorite, but like maybe one of the most unknown cases, is because number one, the Canary Islands has an active volcano on it. It has a volcano, but it's active. It was erupting last year significantly, by the way. There are a lot. When I'm saying a lot, I'm emphasizing that in all caps and in bold. There are a lot of UFO sightings near volcanoes, dormant and active. One of them is in Mexico, the Popocatépetl volcano there, where there is a live cam and people have captured craft objects of unknown origin coming in and out of it. The Canary Islands might be an example of this. And it gets even stranger because a few months prior to that, in June of 1976, there was another UFO sighting. When I'm saying a UFO sighting, a UFO was actually seen, and I have the image for it as well. Here it is. Let's get into this one. Because on the evening of June 27th in 1976, the skies over La Palma and La Gomera were alight with unusual luminous phenomena, capturing and captivating the residents with lights and maneuvers unlike they had previously observed. And the following morning, newspapers burst with headlines declaring that thousands of people had been witness to a spectacular phenomena enduring 20 minutes. And the most extraordinary claim involved the sighting of a sphere reportedly inhabited by bizarre alien entities. And we are seeing one of the images right here on screen that was published in a newspaper back in 1976. Now, in response to these crazy reports, the commanding general of the Canary Island Air Zone appointed an investigative procedure on this, and 3 days later to and th- they only had 3 days to unravel the mystery. So this investigative project, its conclusions were eventually passed to journalist J.J. Benitez by a Spanish Air Force general back in 1976, propelling the incident into the international spotlight. Have you come across this case? I have never come across this case before. So, this investigation formed the foundation of Bennett's book called UFOs Official Documents of the Spanish Government. And the intrigue surrounding this case was reignited back in 1994 with the public release of the investigation files akin to a Spanish version of the Freedom of Information Act, FOIA. So, the extensive report compiled over 100 pages of witness testimonies, evaluations, investigations, photos, and more. And central to the official Air Force report were the detailed accounts from 14 witnesses, setting a precedent when the credibility of testimonies was often judged based on the witnesses' social standings. Because you had a doctor's testimony, which was deemed highly credible, while that of a common laborer was largely disregarded. So, yes, a bias at that in this instance, and it did not retract from the consensus of the witnessed events. And so the report meticulously catalog the observations in chronological order, offering a comprehensive overview of the incident. And the first reported observation came from the Navy escort ship positioned off the coast of Fuerteventura Island. And this ship was known as the Atrevida ship. So the ship's captain provided an a pretty bizarre description of the phenomenon observed by him and his crew at precisely 9:27 p.m. on June 22nd, setting the stage for one of the most detailed and publicized UFO sightings in the Canary Islands and throughout Spain. So the crew aboard witnessed this yellow blue light maneuvering towards the ship and the island. And initially mistaken for a conventional aircraft, the light morphed into a rotating beam, creating a stunning halo effect that lasted 40 minutes without any radar detection. From that alone, we are hearing that a Navy crew saw a UFO for 40 minutes, but they weren't able to capture it on radar. With our modern knowledge about UFOs, we could consider it to be similar to the Nimitz encounter, for instance. They might say, well, that's kind of a stretch, Christina. Hear me out. We are hearing military officials come to a consensus and say, yeah, let's tell the public about this. Let's go ahead. What do we have to lose? And they had an encounter. And so the reason to why the Nimitz encounter has gained such fame and notoriety is not just because of the footage, but also because of David Fravor, also because of Alex Dietrich, and those that were in the vicinity that also saw this craft or heard the stories, because they have more credibility according to the public's mind, more so than your average Joe. That's why, one of several reasons why the Tic Tac is placed in such high regard. Then you also have the Pentagon that authenticated the footage, right? That's another big plus. But with this case, we can say we could possibly place them in the same category. But the incident prompted the commanding general of the Canary Island Air Force Zone to really look into this. So they did the investigation. They only had 3 days to attempt and get an answer, but they weren't really able to, because at the Atrevilla's ship, the captain detailed the sighting of the intense light that split into parts, with one segment displaying a blue cloud all under a large halo that illuminated the surroundings for 40 minutes. So you had it first morph and then come into multiple parts. That kind of sounds a little bit like the Aguadilla footage in Puerto Rico. That was that is military footage. You can find it online. I wasn't going to cover it today because you're probably very familiar with it, but I can definitely place it as an honorable mention or a highlight when talking about this Canary Island incident in 1976. But it also observed a cross section of Canary Island residents, including we had professionals, we had doctors and teachers who provided pretty credible accounts. And the official investigation, however, found no aerial traffic or military exercises that could explain the sightings, leading to speculation of a UFO. But then we have Dr. Francisco Pardon Leon's detailed account, and his really stood out because summoned from a house call in Las Rojas, he and his cab driver encountered a transparent bluish sphere with a metallic platform and large humanoid figures in red. And despite the bizarre nature of the sighting, the doctors reputation lent credibility to his report. Isn't that kind of crazy seeing humanoid figures in red in a craft while he's driving down the road? That's pretty wild. But the investigation's final report acknowledged the genuine observance of the craft, but remained ambiguous about the smaller orb and its occupants, suggesting witnesses were truthful, yet what they saw was too incredible to fully accept. Thus, the Canary Island UFO incident remains an authenticated yet unexplained event in that area documented, though extensive, UFO reports and eyewitness accounts, people are still not able to fully understand or identify what took place back in 1976. Could we possibly classify this as a UFO flap, or are they two separate instances? One that took place on June 22nd, where you had a handful of witnesses, and then the other one that took place soon after on November 12th of that same year. They're in the same area, they're in the same year. Could we place it as a UFO flap, or are they two separate instances? I'd like to know your idea on that because it seems that people haven't fully decided, and it's kind of up to your own interpretation on that. So let me know in the live chat. That's the best thing about being able to catch these shows live, is that myself and so many others are able to understand your insights and your opinions along with your questions as well. Right now, we have 385 people watching this live. If you're enjoying that show, hit that like button right down below. But also, really, I really try to answer the questions that have been postulated here today. But on top of that, please let me know, out of all the cases that we covered today, which one was your favorite? Which one had you not heard of before? Which one have you heard of, but you might have slightly forgotten some of the details? Let me know in the live chat. Let me know in the comments below, as I do try my absolute best to read all of the comments. I want to say thank you to everyone watching this live, all of my amazing YouTube members, Patreon supporters, my mods, and even those that caught this on replay. Before you head out, here is the QR code for all of my social media links, and also where I create space ambient music called Cosmic Portals on YouTube. And guess what? We are finally putting it on Spotify and across all music platforms. So keep an eye out for that. But also on this QR code, it'll take you to my website where I write articles for all of the shows right here. They're cute, they're bite sized, and filled with pictures as well. Here's a really cool tidbit that I want to head and want to give to you before we head out, and that is, if you really want to see behind the scenes chaos, secret ramen recipes, and to get free merch, you can become a Patreon member and start for free. So be part of the tight knit community and really to get an inside on everything that we do right here on this channel. That is it for today. I will see you tomorrow for Mysteries with a History. Be safe, and remember, keep your eyes on the skies.